So in the last 6 months or so, between the last BlizzCon and now, there was an interview, and it featured one of the WoW dev team discussing the raid encounters and how they go about designing these raid encounters. And they were saying about how, oh, we're gonna do a 10 boss raid. And then they go, right, okay, so what bosses thematically would fit into this raid, So, for example, something like Eternal Palace, well, a lot of Naga stuff would make sense. Queen Ashara, of course, and they fill the encounter with a lot of these types of mobs and types of bosses, and then go, lore-wise, is there anything cool that we can throw into this encounter that makes sense? Any boss that we can bring in? Any, old baddie that we can kind of restore and bring back to the game, and that kind of thing. And they said what they do is they get these bosses, and then they go, right, now that we've kind of figured out what boss we're going to have and generally how the fight is going to play out, then let's get to work on designing these bosses, right? And so what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, who's excited about this boss? And somebody will put their hand up and be like, oh, I'm excited about that boss. I want to design that thing. And then they'll go, okay, well, you do that one then. And then what about this boss? Anybody want to do boss number 4? And then somebody goes, oh, yeah, that boss looks really cool. I'll do that one. I'm excited about that one. Well, if they do the same design philosophy with classes and specs, I feel like the guy that's working on Feral didn't put his hand up. I'm confused. I'm confused so far. So I want to caveat this video and kind of preliminarily say this is alpha. We haven't even had a release yet of the alpha. This is pre-release alpha. This is all just data mined information, so it is definitely subject to change. It is definitely not all set in stone. Some of the wording on this stuff could be different. We could get into the actual alpha and say, oh no, that ability we thought was gone is actually still right there. It's fine. But also I would like to say, remember how Feral Druid released in 8.0? Oh dear, Feral. A lot of you probably don't remember it because you played it for a week and went, nah, I'm switching main, right? Any subtlety rogues in chat? So, it's important that we as a community explain to Blizzard what the issues are here, right? Now, if they had made if they had made these alpha changes and they had gone, right, well, Feral gets a buff here with this damage, they get a nerf here on this damage, and blah, blah, blah. I don't care about damage, right? Because damage, that's a tuning knob. That can change, right? However, core playstyle design is not a knob that is easily tuned, okay? That is something that has to be implemented and designed around, right? And that affects how you actually play the game. So things like utility changes or playstyle changes are dramatic changes. And that's why I want to very early on make this video going into why we're having issues, right? So Feral Druid right now, I've said in the past, competes with Outlaw Rogue and it competes with Resto Druid. It of course also technically competes with Boomkin, because if you're saying, right, we want a DPS, oh, let's bring a Druid because we want a battle res or whatever. Oh, Boomkin or Feral, which one do we bring? So yeah, we compete directly against Outlaw and Resto Druid. There's a lot of things that Outlaw can do that we do similarly, having stealth, having a single target stun, and all that stuff. Pretty good AoE, not great single target. We're similar in many ways, right? But also, we have the, added bonus, we don't have things like Shroud and Cheat Death and Vanish and all that kind of stuff, but also, we do have Dispel Curse, Dispel Poison, we have Entangling Roots, Typhoons, all that kind of stuff, right? That makes us more druidic. And that's what we share with the Resto Druid. Right now, the meta is if you have a Resto and an Outlaw, which most groups do, then there's no need to bring a Feral, right? So that being said, going into the alpha then, and looking at the changes being made to the utility side of things, I don't care so much about damage, right? Let's talk about the utility. So every single Druid spec is going to get these abilities here. Ferocious Bite, Bark Skin, Cyclone, Stampeding Roar, and Iron Fur. Now, Cyclone, across the board, that's great. That's great. Nobody has that currently except for in PvP, so that's great. Ferocious Bite, probably not going to get a whole lot of use. Iron Fire, again, probably not going to get a whole lot of use across the board. It's probably really these three abilities that are going to be major. So, Stampeding Roar, everyone's now going to get access to that. Barkskin, everyone's now going to get access to that. And that comes with Feral Druid losing Survival Instincts, which is huge. Right now, Survival Instincts is probably one of the best defensive abilities in the game. It's 2 charges on a 2-minute cooldown, 50% reduced, all damage, not just physical, not just magic, all damage for 6 seconds. That is an incredible defensive. Apart from things like a cheat death or a cloak, which removes all damage completely, it is very, very good. Changing that for Barkskin is just soul destroying. That's probably my biggest concern right now. So I really hope that Blizzard reverses that change and decides that that's not the best call, right? You then have Stampeding Roar. So we're gonna look at Stampeding Roar and go into kind of the other changes that are coming. So with the affinities, now you have the affinity talent row, that's going to be slightly changing. So if you have Balance affinity, you gain Typhoon. If you have Resto affinity, you gain Ursul's Vortex. If you have Feral affinity, you gain Maim. And if you have Guardian affinity, you gain Incapacitating Roar. So, if you think, if you're a Resto Druid, you already have Typhoon and Vortex. So what's going to happen? You're going to maintain Vortex. You're then going to probably go Balance affinity and take Typhoon. And then you've just gained Stampeding Roar now. Like, you've just gained Stampeding Roar, right? So you've kept what you already had, and then gained Stampeding Roar. Boomkin already has Typhoon, doesn't have Stampeding, doesn't have Maim, doesn't have Incap, doesn't have Vortex. They're now going to have Typhoon and gain Vortex and Stampeding Roar, okay? Guardian Druid has, well, everything. They have Stampeding, they have Incap, they have Vortex, they have Typhoon. So Guardian Druid has just lost one of those things. Either Vortex or Typhoon, right? So Guardian's just kind of shrunk. Then Feral has Maim and Typhoon currently. So whereas before, if you competed a Feral and a Boomkin, you would say, oh, well, Feral has Typhoon, Boomkin has Typhoon, Feral also has Maim. Right? A single target stun. Whereas you would make that connection and go, oh, Feral kind of wins in that department a little bit, right? Now, Feral has Maim, Boomkin has Typhoon, and then Feral has to take Typhoon, whereas Boomkin's just gained Ursul's Vortex. So now, and if you compare Maim and Ursul's Vortex, like, Maim is a single target stun that costs combo points. Ursul's Vortex is going to pull every single mob in an area, right? That's huge. That's huge CC for a tank. Boomkin and Resto have just gained things. Feral and Guardian have either stayed the same or lost something. That's huge, okay? Bear in mind, we're already, like, Boomkin also already have Trents, Innovate, and Solar Beam, okay? That's really major. So if we look at the utility of Feral, we're really struggling now. When you compare us to the rest of the Druid specs, Feral and Guardian are kind of struggling. I'm going to focus mostly on Feral. So Feral's really struggling now with the utility things. Now let's look at the playstyle changes. So without going into too much detail, Balance has just had a rework on its Starfall, and it looks really good. It's going to increase the length of their dots, which is really helpful because Boomkin spend a lot of time in combat currently, dotting everything up. Their Starfall's not very good. Yada, yada, yada. That's just had some slight design changes. I'm not a Boomkin main. I think it looks pretty good. Maybe people will say it doesn't. And obviously that's going to be damage dependent. If they crank up the damage and go, yes, Starfall now does ridiculous AoE, that's going to be really cool when they're going to play it and it's going to be really strong. At the same time, even if it's good for the playstyle, but the damage is really low, remember that little tuning knob, then Boomkin's going to go, oh, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. So right now, Boomkin looks like it's had some cool changes, and it looks interesting, right? They've got a new resource system and all that kind of stuff. Going back to the Eclipses, great. Feral Druid has had a playstyle change. I don't care about the damage, right? I care about the playstyle change. Blood Talons is being reworked. Now, when you use Shred, Rake, and Ferocious Bite in quick succession, so you have to use those abilities, the damage of their next rip will increase dramatically. Now, there's an actual better breakdown of how that's going to work. I believe it is here. Yes. When you use Shred, Rake, and Ferocious Bite within 3 seconds, the damage of your next rip is increased by 50%. So currently, the way Blood Talons works in a single target opener is you would pre-regrowth, go into stealth, you would berserk into Tiger's Fury, into a rake, into a rip, into a thrash if you're using one flesh running, and build up 5 combo points with shred. You would then do a big ferocious bite, which would renew the time on your rip, and that rip is snapshotted now for the length of combat, as long as you don't let that rip fall off. As you're playing Sabretooth most of the time in a single target situation with Blood Talons, then you're going to prolong that rip and everything's going to be great, right? So you get rip up very early on into combat and you maintain that for the rest of combat. Is it boring? A little bit boring. But does it work? It works, right? Looking at this Blood Talons change, I don't understand how it's going to work. And I'm trying to think about it, right? So let's say you start combat and right now you stealth and you'd rake, because when you rake from stealth, it increases the damage of that rake by, 100%, which is huge, and also stuns the target if that's necessary. So now you're gonna shred into rake, into like an immediate ferocious bite, into building up another 5 combo points, and then ripping? Or are you going to rake at the beginning of combat, build up 5 are you gonna rake, rip, then shred, then override that rake? Like, I just don't get it. And even so, let's say you do a flawless rotation, you shred, let's say 3 times, and then you rake and the rake crits, and then you do a big ferocious bite. You then get increased damage of your next rip by 50%. So then are you going to shred 5 more times potentially and then put your first rip on in combat? It's like 10 seconds, 13 seconds into combat before you start ripping. That doesn't make any sense to me, because the aim here is to increase the damage of rip and make rip better. But if you put it on 10-15 seconds into combat, it doesn't make sense to me, and I'm trying to figure it out, and I think it's one of those things that we need to jump into the game and actually get it in our hands and try it out. But right now I'm like, okay, so our opener just doesn't make any sense. Our utility's just been nerfed into the ground compared to other Druid specs. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm really sitting here going, is the guy that, or the girl that's working on Feral Druid, are they even switched on? Do they even want to be there? It's crazy. But apart from that, the other changes that we're going to see is Brutal Slash is going to strike up to 5 targets now instead of all targets. This is a change across the board. It looks like most, if not all, AoEs are being capped at 5 to 8 targets, depending on what spec it is and what ability it is. Now, there are some things like Thrash and Swipe and Primal Wrath haven't been accounted for here. So are they going to allow bleeds and certain other abilities to still be uncapped in AoE? Or is this just the first draft and then they're going to make changes to the other abilities later? We have to kind of wait and see on that one. That could be interesting to see. I'm kind of, like, part of me goes, oh, that's a bummer, because I really like massive pulls. I love to, like, cleave everything down. It's chaotic. You got to interrupt this, stun that, soothe that, and it's crazy and it's fun, right? And obviously, if the more you can pull and you can manage it, it shows your skill as a group, as a team, and your ability to time a key in a +1, a +2, potentially a +3, because you're able to pull really big and handle it. Whereas if every group just has to pull 1 pack at a time, where do you really excel? Where do you really show your power as a player? Also, I would say some specs do really well in mass AoE, whereas some, like, I would say Feral Druid performs its worst in a dungeon environment on 1 to 3 targets, because the rotation's kind of clunky. You kind of want a Primal Wrath, but you also maybe want to just do 2 single target rips. You still want a Ferocious Bite, but you then want to maintain your rakes as well. Like, it just seems a little bit clunky, whereas when you jump into a mass AoE environment and you're just 1 Thrash, bunch of Swipes, big Primal Wraths, like, the damage is just there. So now if we're going to be capped at 5 targets and we're going to be pulling these smaller mob packs, are we going to find that we struggle with that kind of composition? Much like Unholy Death Knight or Fire Mage might also struggle, where they go, I need a lot of things. I need a lot of things. Now, if everybody's capped at 5, how's that going to work? So maybe the damage will be changed accordingly. Other things to note, really. There are some minor things, like we might not be able to Stampeding Roar in cat form and that kind of thing, which is potentially interesting. That might just be a tooltip error, and actually it might be okay. There have been no changes to Berserk. I think Berserk is the worst cooldown I've ever seen in my life. It's just flat energy gain, which is fine at the beginning of an expansion, but towards the later end of an expansion where you have a bunch of like haste and, I mean, Memory of Lucid Dreams and like, you got Predator and your Jungle Furies and like all that kind of stuff, and you're just getting energy just passively, and Soul of the Forest, and you're just getting all this energy. Like, you don't really need Berserk in a lot of situations, right? So that's interesting. It just seems when you compare it to some other specs, say like Enhancement Shaman, which is getting like Wind Fury Totem and Wind Fury Weapon and like, I don't know, just getting like really cool abilities and stuff. It just seems like they haven't really figured out what the hell they want Feral to be. Now, Druid has 4 specs, obviously. Good math, EU math there. Druid has 4 specs. Now, if Blizzard came out and said, look, we can't have every single Druid spec be competitive. It just can't be. We can't have, if you have the top 5 specs in the game and Druid are 4 of those or 3 of those for raiding, Mythic Plus, and PvP, look, guys, we just can't have it. That I understand, right? I don't think every class, like, if you're a pure DPS class, like a rogue or a mage, sorry, you should probably be one of the best DPS in the game for at least a type of content. Raid, Mythic Plus, like whatever. You should probably be one of the best, because you don't have it. You can't off heal. You can't tank. You can't like do that. You have to. If all you can do is damage, and you can't even be the best at that. Imagine losing to a hybrid as a pure DPS. You just be. It can't happen. So if Blizzard came out and said, "Look, Boomkin is going to be really good this expansion. Resto's going to be really good this expansion. Feral, Guardian. Sorry, but 2 out of 4 ain't bad, right?" I would say, you know what, Blizzard? Okay, that's fine. I understand the design philosophy. You've given everyone else a chance. You got 2 solid specs on Druid. No problem, right? But if they don't come out and say that, and they're trying to display that, like, Feral is as good as, or like they put as much effort into this as they have some of the other specs, it's just not true. It's just not true, and it's like, it's lying to themselves and it's lying to us. Now, what I would like to see is, we still haven't looked at the gameplay. We still haven't seen the dungeons. We still haven't seen the raids. We still haven't seen how the content's going to work. It might be that actually Feral Druid is in a really good position. We already have an AoE, like an AoE finisher. We have a single target finisher. We have, Thrash and Swipes. We've got some good AoE abilities going on. We've got some good single target stuff, some bleeds to maintain. We've kind of got a good toolkit. We've got a speed increase, we've got Entangle, Typhoon. If we go Balance Affinity, we've got Maim, we've got Dispels, we've got Off Heals. We've got a lot of stuff. So, like, we look pretty good on paper. We're going to get Cyclone, so we look pretty good on paper. But I think functionally, like, if we are what we are now and the damage just scales really high, then that's cool, and maybe it'll be okay. But I don't understand how Blood Talons is going to exist if they don't make changes to Sabretooth. Like, how is Sabretooth going to work? Just doesn't, I don't know. This needs another look. We need to get into the beta, or the alpha of the beta, and we need to have a look. So please, Feral Druids, it's time to unionize, right? We need to elect a union leader, and we need to give that person, we need to get them alpha, because this is really important. There's also things like we're getting Heart of the Wild, right? Which is going to be a druid talent. And like, so if you go Heart of the Wild talent, it's going to increase your balance damage by like 40% or something like, or like massively increase your balance abilities, and obviously your Resto, Guardian, whatever. The only time as Feral that I've actually gone into Boomkin form is at the start of a dungeon to kind of pretend to the rest of the group that I'm not actually a Feral. I don't really see the point of that kind of talent in the way that the game works now. You're not going to be in a Mythic Plus and go, oh, don't worry, I'm going to jump into, I've got Heart of the Wild, I'm going to jump into Guardian really quick, jump into Bear Form, and I'm going to tank this mob pack for us. Like, this doesn't seem to work. Maybe it could be cool in, like, Torghast, the solo content. It could be really good, but I don't know, dude. Anyway, that's kind of my rant. I want to hear what you guys think. Actually, a funny little tidbit. I went into the Feral Druid Discord yesterday, so this is what, the 9th of April right now. I went into the Feral Druid Discord yesterday, right after these class changes were announced, and everybody's freaking out, right? People are losing their minds, the whole place is burning, everyone's freaking out. I then go into the Balanced Druid Discord, which is like just above it, you know, I go in, and they're talking about different types of sandwiches. If that doesn't tell you what the situation is right now, then I don't know how else to put it to you. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to hear from you. This is like crazy changes, and let's hope that it, you know, once we see more of the legendaries and the type of content that's going to exist and what talent trees might change, hopefully we'll get a clearer picture and maybe Feral will come out okay. But right now it's a little bit of a laughing stock. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.